So we now turn to our discussion panel on the great spiritual transition. Humanity is living through a critical moment, one that marks a transformation into a new era of spiritual growth. It is time to awaken and to rise to a higher level of awareness. As the moderator of this panel, let me introduce you to Jana Machado. Jana Machado is a board member of the Spiritist Society Seeds of Light in Florida, where she plays an active leadership role. She also serves on the board of the Spiritist Federation of Florida and is a member of its Children and Youth Committee, supporting the spiritual education of younger generations. Welcome, Jana.
I would like to give you a warm good morning from the Sunshine State, Florida. It's an honor to be here, not only, to share Spiritism with all of you, but with my special friends that are in the panel with me. So before, we invite our panelists to the stage, a quick reminder, if you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to submit them using the QR code on the screen. If you prefer, you can write your question on paper and handle it to the volunteer at the check-in desk. We will do our best to address as many questions as possible during today's Q&A session. Our first panelist is our friend Luis Lima. I'm having trouble with this microphone. Luis Lima is a dedicated researcher focused on scientific aspects of Spiritism, working to strengthen the connection between science and Spiritist teachings. A respected speaker within the Spiritist community. He regularly participates in seminars and events nationwide. Professionally, Luis works in the field of computer networks. With you, Luis Lima. Our next panelist is our dear Marcia Trajano. She is the president and a founding member of the Solitude Center for the Spiritual Living in Tennessee. She also co-founded the Christian Spiritist Community of Atlanta and served on the board of the U.S. Spiritist Federation. She currently works in the healthcare industry. And last but not least, our young Leo Haddad. Leo Haddad is a recovery advocate at Nova Recovery, a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center. Involved in Spiritist youth education from a young age, he later became an educator himself. Leo is an active participant in the Spiritist movement and is deeply committed to promoting its values. So with you all, our three panelists. And to set the tone of our conversation this morning, because our intention is to, smoothly go from one topic to another, as if we were sitting down in our living room, drinking a little coffee and eating pão de queijo. Why not? Humanity is living a unique moment in history. Never before have we had so many scientific and technological advances. Yet, never have we faced so many moral, social, and spiritual crises. Have you ever sensed that you are meant for more? Not to have more, but to be more. There is a quiet longing inside of many of us, a knowing that we are not here just to get by, to check boxes or meet expectations. We are here to grow, to evolve, to become, to shed old layers, release old fears, and rise into the fullness of who we were always meant to be. And despite today's pains and challenges, we are being invited to grow spiritually, transforming our choices and gratitudes to help build a new era, the great spiritual transition. So our first question today will be to our friend Luis Lima. Luis, how can you tell us about why this moment is so important and why we must expand our collective consciousness to move forward? How does the concept of planetary transition helps us understand the great spiritual transition?
Yeah, this topic, I think it was on on the high by 2012 when the Mayan calendar became this thing of the moment. Nothing happened, and I think it was very poorly understood what it means. The Maya had. We're not going to talk about the Mayan calendar, uh, uh, in a full extent. Of 1 minute crash course on a Mayan calendar, they had 8 calendars. One of them was measuring the projection of the evolution of consciousness. It was something very serious. What you see here on the screen is a visual summary of the calendar. You see 9 levels that became pyramids that they built. All Mayan pyramids have 9 levels. And the levels, as you see here on the far right of the screen, had names. And it has to do with the evolution of consciousness. So, for example, on the bottom level, which started with the Big Bang, cellular level, and then we go into mammalian and we keep going and going. Each level has a triggering point, and the triggering point is on the far left of each rectangle. And when you get close to our days, you see it there in green, below the green, 3115 BC. That's when Egypt becomes the first nation. So you can tell just by the names on the right side that the consciousness is coming from the very bottom, cellular, to something universal. We did this, but we shouldn't have. We cannot really pinpoint days because we thought the last day of the world was December 21st, 2012. Because how can you match calendars if they didn't have days like we do? This is not measuring astronautics and astronomics. So we had to re-engineer the calendar by considering that they said there was a comet going on, and then the astronomers have to go back in time, project back in time. This is probably year such and such. And that's how we rebuilt the calendar. So we cannot pinpoint. So when you see at the top, for example, the last layer of consciousness, it's not really 2011. We should maybe give it a first half of the 2000s, something like that. And then you see the tendency is to make this a universal consciousness. Isn't that what Spiritism says? When Allan Kardec talks about the law of progress, it tells us the spirits responding to his questions tells us exactly that. It's going to converge to one thing. That one thing is the universal consciousness. And we are going through a turmoil in the world right now, in everywhere, every part of the world, because of this change of consciousness. It's something very serious, very complicated, because not everybody is at the same level of evolution. So those who are higher in the level of evolution understand better than the others, and the others fight back because they don't want, evolution to be at a higher level. It's very complicated. That complicates, I think, a lot of what the situation is today. But Spiritism is very clear on this. It's very clear. It's going to happen whether you want it or not, because the planetary fluid, which is after several modifications, comes from the universal cosmic fluid. It's held by highly evolved spirits, Jesus, and they prepare that fluid to serve spirits that have to undergo trials and expiations, as we do. It's not because they don't have the ability to do better than Earth. They have the ability to create better than Earth, but somebody has to be at the Earth level. So we need to have an Earth or several Earths out there. And that's why we are at this level here. And that's what I think it is.
All right. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move on to our friend Marcia. Marcia, can you provide how spiritual psychology complements the idea of planetary transition?
Thank you. Thank you, Jana. This is such a good question. And want to just say thanks everyone for being here. And we start with Mayan calendar, planetary transition, very, very, cosmic, if you think about it. Let's dive into the self, the human being. And from that, we have to reference our dear Joanna De Angelis with spiritual psychology, but also referencing Jung, Carl Gustav Jung, who we see a very tight connection in the literature by Joanna De Angelis. But what I wanted to bring here is the concept of the archetype, so psychology, and of the apocalypse. And I know whenever we talk about this, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I maybe think that in all of your minds as well, is what are you talking about? Luis said it was going to be okay. Leisure said it's going to be okay. Yuri said it's going to be okay. And you're talking about apocalypse. Are we talking about a sense of catastrophe or the end of it all? And we need to go back to the idea of what does it mean apocalypse. It's from a Greek etymology. It just means reveal what was once hidden. And I love that because if you think about the book of Revelations with Saint John, that's exactly what he says, right? We read the end of the world, but he's only talking about that revelation. So when we pop on into the idea then of, okay, apocalypse, we're going to come to terms with this revelation of what is our real truth. But what about archetype? Can you, Marcia, this is me asking myself, think about what is it? And I would like for all of us to, for just 10 seconds, to close your eyes perhaps and think about when I say apocalypse, what image comes to mind, right? And this is very interesting because that notion of apocalypse ranges from, I don't know, religious, cultural, spiritual, and even a very personal level. So many different of imageries from a religious perspective, as I reference, and it's beyond John. We have an idea of end of it all, of punishment, of judgment. When we talk about cultural aspects, we're now talking, and I have to say it for whoever saw Wednesday, right? The zombies come to mind, and but also the notion that technological advances that like the Y2K or the 25 years ago or the Mayan calendar 2012 a scare that so many of us were there, but from a technology we're also discussing perhaps the fears that we're all facing with, for example, artificial intelligence, right? So it keeps going culturally speaking, and it also bridges to some things that have been talked about already here, which is this cultural turmoil, the very divided place that we live today, the trauma that is being seen politically, geographically, etc., etc. Catastrophic climate issues, and so you can see that is culturally how we understand perhaps apocalypse. But if we move down to your question, what about from a psychology perspective? And it really references that anxiety, that existential anxiety that we're all suffering. We as a human race, right? And at a personal level, it just really means all the issues, our deep, darkest fears that we're going through right now, and we all sum it up. What comes to my mind when we talk about apocalypse? But I start to talk about the archetype of apocalypse, right? So if we put it all together, I wanted to bring the notion, and this is a symbolic sequence brought to us by Carl Gustav Jung. That's like that symbolic sequence comes number one. We're talking about revelation. Number two, we're now talking about judgment. Number three, destruction. And number four, new birth. So, real quickly, because I can see I only have a few more minutes here, Jana. But when we reference this idea of the symbolic sequence within the idea of the archetype of apocalypse, let's think 200 years ago to now. So now we're talking. I think Yuri did such a good job in Ligia on referencing Kardec and the birth of Spiritism. But let's think the entire 100 years, 1800s, 1900s. What happened? From a revelation perspective, a lot happened. There was this outburst of information, new scientific fields, even sociology, psychology, among much more that came to our awareness, our consciousness. That's revelation, right? The second part in that symbolic sequence is really all about judgment. And when we talk about judgment, we're really referencing the fact that at some point after this 200 years, or within those 200 years period, as an example, we had to judge those old theories, old institutions, old ways of working or living no longer applied. They became obsolete. So we judged them so that we could be ready for the new era. So revelation, judgment, and now the difficult words, right? Destruction. And the destruction is just that old institutions being destroyed. We can all think very easily when we talk about technology, right? How some technological apparatus from a rotary phone, yes, such thing existed, folks, to many others where they no longer apply. So it is futile for us to start to work in this nostalgic view of we have to keep on doing and believing what we did 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. And I'm talking right now, we are suffering because it's no longer 200 years. It's really yesterday, right? Things are going so fast. And finally, the fourth in the sequence, it's really the new birth, which is this new sense of a new beginning. Do I have a minute to finish? 1 minute.
A very
Okay.
short minute.
I'm sorry. A short
very
minute.
short minute.
So we talk about, again, really broad view of the word from this apocalyptic idea, but from us inner, right? This is what's important. And then there is this really beautiful marriage between Jung and Joanna in applying that symbolic sequence. So if you think about that revelation, and I'm going to move away the judgment, but destruction from the revelation, it's really what Joanna calls the inner crisis, right? And she calls this the beautiful invitation from God to think about it. But how does it express in ourselves? It's usually a sense of depression, of anxiety. Something is wrong. Something is being revealed psychologically, and I cannot touch upon it, but that's how it's been expressed to myself. Number two, the second part, which is real, the destruction proper, which is this idea of the dissolution of our ego. I think it was Yuri who mentioned the evil twins, right? So now we're talking about selfishness as demonstrated from those inflated egoic constructs. And when we go through dissolution, which Joanna D'Angelo calls this, I love it, this necessary dissolution of this the false, sorry, the necessary dissolution of the false self, which is the idea of the ego trying to be the self, that close to God, that divine, that imago Dei, as Jung mentions. So finally, we come to the new birth, right? The revelation proper, the apocalypse, which is once we go through those, sense of despair, distress, depression, to revealing that all those masks and everything that we hold dear to us are going to be destroyed, we're now ready to be in the path of individuation using Jung's vocabulary. We are in the path using now Joanna D'Angelo's vocabulary to invite God, the divine essence within. And that's, folks, is the new era and how we become ready for this expanded consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you. Now that we have explored the symbolic and psychological meaning of the apocalypse, I'd like to invite Leo into the conversation. Leo, in today's world, what are some modern examples of how the idea of apocalypse manifests? And how can these challenges invite us to honor the cycles of life?
I think it's interesting. There's like the more societal like perspective, and there's like the more personal perspective. So in society, I think we see people talking about AI a lot, about how that's going to be apocalyptic. And I think it's interesting because we can look at AI in that way. But I think that a lot of what we do is maybe project things externally because we have anxieties internally, like a lot of what Marcia was mentioning. Sorry about that. Um, so yeah, I think that societally we're always like looking for the end of the world, like starting from way back in Mayan calendar and all these examples. And ultimately, we are seeing a transformation in our world, right? From the planet of probably Spiações to a planet of regeneration. But ultimately the question is going to come down to what is our role in the transformation, right? Because the world is only made up of us, right? So what is our role? Are we going to go into the world of regeneration, advance, or are we going to, stick behind? I don't know what that looks like, but we definitely want to be part of the group that's moving forward. Yeah. So I guess I could bring a little bit of my own life into this conversation, because I think that a lot of people nowadays, especially my age, honestly any age, the longer time goes on, the more I'm just like, you can have a crisis at whatever age, it doesn't matter. But everyone's always talking about how the youth is lost and all these things, and that's probably true as well. But in my own life, yeah, I was definitely lost for quite a while. I was brought up in Spiritism, but as I grew up a little bit, high school, college stuff came around, I kind of lost myself. And obviously, college is where you can definitely distance yourself because you're usually far from home, and you got new friends, you got everything, you got parties, you got a bunch of stuff going on. So that's basically what happened. And after fighting anxiety, depression, a lot of just difficult things, I came back to Spiritism and to Christ, those two things together, which are so powerful. And I don't know why, but something just came to my mind, which was when Emmanuel told Chico Xavier, he said, if uh, if you have to choose, then take Christ and take Spiritism and leave me behind, essentially. If Emmanuel said, if I ever make a mistake, and that's coming from Emmanuel, who's, levels above us. So, Yeah, I think that we all see in our personal lives the opportunity for transformation, sometimes more dramatically and sometimes, more slowly. But in times of crisis, we definitely see these opportunities, these invitations, as you said, to awaken our consciousness. And if anybody's going through any difficulty, uh, I think it was Lija, the speaker before, who talked about how when we're just like, what's going on? You know what I mean? Like, we don't see God's plan. It's like, trust God's plan. And it's always an invitation to go back to the virtues, go back to Christ, go back to, love thy neighbor. Because once you align yourself in that path, like, things become a lot more clear, and that's progress. And unfortunately, we need like that cattle prod, like it was mentioned earlier, to so that we can move along, because we're just naturally lazy, myself included. um but yeah, I think the world is definitely going through a transition, and apocalypse is on people's minds because you just look around and you think, what's going on, where's the order, there's a lot of chaos going on. But definitely, look to your own life and look to your own struggles, and know that the reason you're struggling is because you're moving forward, because God is inviting you, and because you're going to be able to overcome it and be a part of the world of regeneration. So, yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You see, that's why we do a mix of, generations in this panel. We have different perspectives. Now, Luis, many of us carry deep fears about death, about loss, or even about collapse of the world around us. From your perspective in drawing on Spiritist teachings, how can we understand these fears, especially the fear of death? Believe me, Spiritists fear death, and a lot, in the light of planetary transition and our return to the spiritual home.
Yeah, we tend to bring this subject within ourselves, but at the material level. When we do this, it means we are not really, our level of consciousness, our level of evolution is not too high, and it isn't. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So, for the level that we are, everything is still very material. Uri mentioned that. Yuri mentioned that. There is a tremendous predominance of evil over good at our stage. When we get to the next stage, there's going to be predominance of good over evil, and things are going to be different. That would be the next level of consciousness, which we are going to transition from trials and expiations that we are at today to regenerative worlds. And that's what on the first, when I showed you the calendar doesn't say end of the world. It says the end of that cycle of consciousness. And then we go to the next one, meaning that ends trials and expiations. And now we're going to go to regeneration, which is the next level up. So each one of us is at a different stage, but we are all going to be at the same stage at one point. But because some of us are at a lower level of evolution, so evil is very predominant on several people on the planet, these people are going to have a hard time following along. The ones where good is already a reality, even if it's fragmented, these people or these spirits are going to have a much easier, smooth transition. We cannot stop the transition because we cannot change the planetary fluid. We can use it. We cannot change it. We didn't make it. It was made by Jesus and company. It would be, too much arrogance of our part trying to do something like he did at this point. One day we're going to create planets. It's going to be good. For now, no, we can't. So the best we can do is, like Leo was saying, is to work on ourselves, our personal struggles. If we need to go higher, we need to climb. In order to climb, we need stepping stones. We need stepping stones. The stepping stones for climbing to a different level of consciousness is challenging yourself or being challenged by circumstances of life the things that happen here materially or spiritually, and why do they happen at the material level? Because that's how we get challenged. We can do a simple test. Just put one person here alone in this room, no cameras, no surveillance, no absolutely nothing, and just put, let's say, 1 million $100 bills in here. Depending on the person, the whole thing disappears. Other people are gonna say, "Wow, the amount, not the amount of dollars, the amount, the number of bills is so high that if I take, 50 of these bills and take home, nobody's gonna notice a difference." And some other people are gonna look at it and say, "Oh my God, somebody lost that money. Let's find the person and give it back to that person." So these are three different levels of consciousness. For most of us, we are still at the bottom level, but planetary transition is what forces us to transition over literally to the next level of consciousness.
All right, thank you.
Now going back to Leo, building on this, what are some archetypal, I don't even know if I said it right, association with these spheres, and how are we invited, again, to honor the cycles of life?
Yeah, I think it's the mainly the archetype of death and rebirth is what the planetary transition is about, right? Because we see all these um images of destruction, and like Louise said, it's not the end, it's just the end of a cycle. So yeah, and death and rebirth happens, I think, on grand scales. I mean, we always see the, like, a good example people always talk about is like forest fires and stuff, how trees and plants and stuff need to be burned down, but then the soil becomes fertile through the ashes so that something else can grow, right? So it's the same thing in our lives, right? The struggles, they purify us, and that's like the death of the old, right? Because the way that we look at the world, it's so precious to us most of the time, where we're just like, if somebody comes along, challenges our viewpoints, it's offensive and it hurts, you know what I mean? And we can't judge anybody for that, because it's the way that we go about in the world, and that's how we understand the world. But unfortunately, how we understand the world is usually wrong for all of us because we're so limited. So eventually something needs to come along to sort of shake us up. So that's going to be the death of the old thing, and it's going to usher in the new, right? Um, yeah, of course.
So I just wanted to add a little bit, trying to show off here my spiritual psychology knowledge. I'm just kidding here. But when the question was about archetypal images, right? And Leo was spot on in terms of death and rebirth, apocalyptic archetype. But maybe what we want to do, and we're talking about cosmic fluid, and but it's too out there for us to bring it in. And I just wanted to say, number one, from a psychology perspective, archetypes is a is part of this universal blueprint that feeds or are inherent to our collective unconscious. And when we talk about this universal blueprint, we really talk about it's in all of us. It doesn't matter if you're born in New Zealand, Brazil, the US. It really does not matter your gender, your creed, or anything. It all of us have those archetypes within. And the other aspect of it is, like instincts and archetypes feed into that collective unconscious, instincts are triggered already, but the archetypes are not. They lay dormant in all of us. Why am I talking about all of this? It is because it's important that what triggers those archetypical responses are usually a crisis. And so we live in a crisis individually and universally, globally. So let's think about it. What is this crisis pushing me for my revelation, destruction, and new birth. It's the death and the birth. What is it that I'm called upon in this, era of crisis? And from that perspective, I think it's really important for us to start think and internalize the outer world and my inner world. And usually, if you don't see it from a um, triggers like dreams or intuition, mediumistic messages, it can be those emotions. Leisha talked about that emotion, how we react. Those are good. The stronger the reaction, emotion reaction, that means that it is something that is triggering those archetypical behavior. And in this case, this is what is calling us or waking us from our sleep, from our slumber. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do have 5 minutes left. I would like to give a chance for three of you, give a very, very short closing statement so I can close with our conclusion. Luis.
So, yeah, I'm just going to say typically we delegate the term planetary transition to the planet. The planet is going to change. The planet is made of matter. So, okay, at your responsibility, you're going to change, and I'm going to see what I'm going to do. That's not. The planetary transition includes mostly us as spirits whose habitat is the earth, incarnated and discarnating spirits. So we should never delegate it, in quotes, to the planet. It's on us. It's our responsibility. And if we don't, follow along with that responsibility, we are going to go somewhere else. That's not fun.
And I just wanted to reiterate Joanna's word. This is those moments of challenges and difficulties, crisis, if you will. They're this beautiful, beautiful invitation from God, from within to our own selves. So let us accept the invitation. Thank you.
I don't have too much more to add to that, except like I said, we got to return to the spiritist and Christian virtues of love, um, love one another, and that's the antidote to the evil twins, as it was called, pride and selfishness. And pride and selfishness is what causes all of our troubles, our anxieties, because it's also a lack of faith in God. So there's a beautiful passage in, I think, the Gospel according to Spiritism, that, or a little sentence that said, love draws God near and hate draws it away. So if you want God near, practice love, and all of your anxieties will subside, and you'll have much more clarity because God will start to show you his plan for your life. So, thank you.
So, in conclusion, what we have heard today, the great spiritual transition, the planetary transition, and the archetype of apocalypse, is not only about destruction, but about unveiling what has been hidden, both in ourselves and in humanity. It is about cycles of death and rebirth, the fears we must face, the invitation to grow spiritually. I hope this conversation leaves us with a sense of hope and responsibility, to see crises as opportunities for renewal, to honor the cycles of life, and to recognize that the expansion of consciousness is already underway. Life isn't static. Everything is constantly shifting and evolving. The question is, are you and me moving in the directions where we are meant to be? Thank you.